To each of my dearest friends, I am honored for you to join me on our journey through the far future. In a galaxy as vast as ours, in which trillions of souls labor away day after day, it is no wonder that some will tragically stray from their reverence towards the Emperor, hoping to garner their own form of strength from the forbidden, darker powers. If left unchecked, these errant souls may indeed go on to perform some truly heinous acts, claiming entire star systems for demonic entities in the foolish thought that it would provide them with an upper hand when it eventually came to bartering with these never-born horrors. But thankfully, most upstart heretics will never get so far in their own tainted mission, as the sacred forces of the Adepta Sororitas are ever vigilant, being ready to respond to even the faintest rumor of a world straying from the Imperial creed. If the High Lords of the Imperium have found themselves opposed to a chaotic uprising of a large enough scale, then they may call for a mighty crusade. But for the Sisterhood, they are under no obligations to wait for such an event to occur. If they believe that the moral heart of the Imperium is under siege, and that the wayward worlds of the galaxy have shunned the Emperor's light, then they may declare a grand military campaign, known as a War of Faith. Upon hearing this, any of the subgroups within the Sisterhood may respond, committing their veteran troops to purge the foul taint of heresy from the stars, restoring some semblance of order before zealous missionaries and interrogator priests begin with the grim task of rooting out the final deplorable traces of corruption from the darkest of city streets. But this brings us to an interesting point, and it is that the organization known as the Adepta Sororitas is not a purely militant group within the ecclesiarchy. Instead, it encompasses a host of supportive, non-militant orders, each of which has a vital role to play in the continued functioning of the Imperium. As such, I believe that we should investigate some of these lesser-known orders, lest their plight go unnoticed for all of time. Firstly, we will look over the militant branch of the Sisters of Battle, not only to learn of their exploits, but also to become more familiar with the terminology used throughout the Sisterhood. After this, we will move on to the various non-militant orders, ranging all the way from the doctors of the Hospitaller to the linguistic experts of the dialogues. But with this out of the way, let us begin and move through the stars to learn of the many distinct and indispensable orders of the Adepta Sororitas. To begin with, I will provide a brief overview to the organization of the Sororitas, as it will help us to best understand the further subdivisions which we are soon to discuss. In short, the Adepta Sororitas are an integral branch of the ecclesiarchy, and although they do perform their righteous acts to safeguard the imperial cult, they are not to be considered as blind followers to each and every word spoken by the head ecclesiarch. For you see, in their ancient past, it was their ancestral organization of the Daughters of the Emperor who ended the tyranny of the dictatorial ecclesiarch known as Gouge Van Dyer. Since that day, they have maintained a secretive watch over the Grand Synod, ever cautious to the heretical signs that this ecumenical lead may have strayed from the imperial truth. With that being said, whilst they still exert the will of the ecclesiarchy, they will ultimately answer to the leadership of the abbess of the Adepta Sororitas, who stands at the head of their organization. This reverential figure holds an immense degree of power within the Imperium, and at times she may even be expected to stand as one of the High Lords of Terror, steering the course of all humanity to best follow the Imperial creed. But beneath her rule, The various sub-factions of the Sisterhood will be directed by one of the two prioresses who maintain command over the convent sanctorum, found upon Ophelia 7, and of the convent prioris, based upon Holy Terror. The two covenants will then hold command over the various orders of the Sisterhood, providing them with holy missions of faith to be taken through the stars, with a sense of righteous determination. Part of the reason as to why these two covenants exist is due to the malign actions taken by the traitor Gouge Van Dyer. During the age of apostasy, he had lorded over the entire Sisterhood, and through their might, he was almost successful in consolidating total control over the Imperium by leading a bloody coup upon Terra itself. Thus, in order to prevent this from ever occurring again, the sisters were divided between these newly established covenants, from where they would monitor each other, ensuring that their organization as a whole remains loyal and steadfast towards the true teachings of the Emperor. Each covenant will rule over a series of subgroups known within the Sisterhood as the Orders. These exist as large organizational groups, each containing thousands of sisters who are utterly dedicated to carrying out the directives of their prioress, seeing their missions as being of the utmost importance to the protection of the moral heart of the Imperium. Depending on one's chosen path, they may belong to either one of the militant or non-militant orders, and although most sisters will remain within one division for their entire life, it is not unheard of for one to switch to another group. For example, if a fervent veteran of the militant Order of the Flaming Rose was grievously injured, then she may put down her bolter and take up a role within the Order's Hospitaller, intent on still serving the Imperium through means not found in battle. But these subgroups are not expected to each reside within the sprawling basilica of their convents, and instead they will have each been provided with their own colossal fortress enclave, known as a sanctuary. They will be dotted about the galaxy, and from these holy sites the sisters will maintain a constant sphere of influence over a vast region, ever being prepared to depart on a war of faith, to purge the Imperium of its most tainted residents. As would be expected, the various orders will each hold unique cultural practices, traditions, color schemes, and tactics, but these differences do not detract from their unwavering loyalty towards the teachings of the Emperor. Within their entire organization, we can safely say that the militant orders of the Sisters of Battle are the most well-known of all within the Imperium, so much so that many people consider the terms Adepta Sororitas and Sister of Battle as being completely synonymous. But, as we have discussed, they are merely a subdivision of the larger grouping. But in any case, there exist 6 Orders Majoris, which are considered to be the largest and most esteemed of all. From the convent sanctorum upon Ophelia VII, we have the Orders of the Bloody Rose, Martyred Lady, and Valorous Heart, whereas from the convent prioris upon Terra, there will be the Orders of the Ebon Chalice, Sacred Rose, and of the Argent Shroud. Each of these will correspond to one of the founding saints of the Sisterhood, namely Alicia Dominica, and of her faithful companions who accompanied her during her fated meeting with the entombed Emperor himself. It is important to note, however, that there are many more militant orders than these 6, and as time passes, their zealous deeds will soon be revealed to us in more detail. But as it so stands today, most within the galaxy will be more familiar with the Orders Majoris. Within their ranks, we will find the tenacious Sisters of Battle, who through every action aspire towards achieving some sense of spiritual purity through their faultless military prowess. This tradition of finding faith through fury has been carried down since their founding days as the Daughters of the Emperor, where they simply existed as a minor devoted cult, who believed that they could best worship the Emperor through martial means. Each and every day will be filled with a mix of quiet prayer and ruthless military training, which they will tirelessly perform, constantly honing their own combative abilities until they may reach some state of militant perfection. Such is the extent of their exemplary skill set that even a novitiate of their order will be a truly formidable warrior by their own right, eclipsing the abilities of all but the most grizzled veterans of the Imperial Guard. But if one stays true on their course and rises to become a fully fledged Sister of Battle, hardened by their endless wars of faith, then it is not so out of the question for a Sister Superior or Palatine to be able to outmaneuver and bring down a novice Marine in single combat. But with this, we must consider the fact that when compared to the Imperial Guard or to the various chapters of the Astartes, that there are far fewer of the Sisters of Battle to be found throughout the stars. Whilst this is true, we must remember that each sister will stand as a perfected exemplar of their martial ability, who will carry their faultless skills into battle as a combined force, fueled by their endless zealotry and faith in the Imperial Creed. There are very few within the Imperium who could possibly match with the devoted tenacity of these sisters, so much so that it can be quite daunting to share a battlefield with them, as one can never be too sure if the scrutinous gaze of these faithful agents will fall upon them, only to find them wanting in their conviction. But outside of the pious Imperium, those who have turned their backs upon the Emperor to favor the teachings of the darker powers, those sorry fools will feel the unbridled fury of the sisterhood carried through their ceaseless conflagration. Long before the sisters even face off with the heretical rejects, their crafts will deploy a host of hovering Lord Hailers to sweep out across the tainted grounds, and once activated, they will emit a truly deafening series of hymns, echoing out as a righteous dirge to pierce the hearts of those who lack in their faith. Through the glorious cacophony, the booming demands of the ecclesiarchy will be heard, ordering the heathens to fall to their knees and to decry their wayward beliefs, and that perhaps by throwing themselves at the feet of the approaching sisters, that they will be able to achieve some form of penance through the purifying flames of war. As the buzzing sounds of chainswords approach, and as the echoing chants of the deployed sisters grows louder, truly it will shock the minds of the heathens to such a degree that their defeat will seem all but inevitable. The enemies of mankind will be purged without mercy, their bodies being immolated under waves of zealous fire, whilst highly precise bursts of bolter fire will utterly devastate whatever pathetic remains could be found within the ash. Through the flames, the charging squads of Sister Repentiers will emerge, charred and ashen by their vigorous attack as they seek to absolve themselves of their past sins, by drowning themselves in the blood of the faithless. Behind them, the tortuous mechanical walkers known as penitent engines will be quick to follow. Piloted by the many heretics and sinners found by the sisters, they will be pumped full of guilt-inducing chemicals, prompting them to recklessly dive into the front lines in a redemptive onslaught, as it is only through their own deaths that they may be forgiven for their most heinous crimes. As the sisters continue in their relentless advance, purging the traitorous scum from their squalid hovels, their own chants and songs will increase in pitch, their prayers being still somehow heard over the deafening chaos of war. It is only once the despicable, faithless miscreants have been utterly exterminated that the sisterhood will take pause. Each and every sister will know that through her deeds, that she has brought herself ever closer to the true teachings of the Imperial Creed, and that by banishing the enemies of man, that this world has been pulled forth from the abyss of corruption, now to be held once more within the great iron cradle of the Imperium. They will reflect on the battle before departing back to their sanctuary, leaving the now liberated world in the hands of the non-militant orders, who will be tasked with bringing the wayward souls of mankind back into the Emperor's light. The various armies of the Imperium exist at a truly mind-boggling scale, with there being perhaps trillions of stalwart humans giving their lives within the ranks of the Imperial Guard, planetary defense forces, and of the Grand Navies. Even though some lucky souls will live out their existence without feeling the rush of battle, we must remember that in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, that there is only war, and through conflict comes casualties. I do not believe that we will ever be able to accurately quantify the levels of death found within the various Imperial armies. But thanks to the Sisters of the Order's Hospitaller, there are many who have been saved from that endless silence. For you see, this Order of the Sororitas exists to act as the medical wards to the many branches of the Imperial armies, although the Adepta Sororitas are typically excluded to their care as they hold their own roster of apothecaries to tend to their needs. More often than not, the distant lords of the administratum will order for the provisioning of medicae servitors, where an entrapped, lobotomized human will administer the most basic care possible. However, robotic medical aid will never be able to hold a candle to the fastidious attention of a trained professional. This would be where the Hospitallers take center stage. As for them, they will venerate the Emperor by tending to the wounded and fallen souls of the Imperial armies, pulling them back from the brink of death to restore their righteous fury against the enemies of all mankind. A trained sister of this order will hold a vast understanding of medicine, being able to quickly tend to most ailments. However, some will choose to further specialize into the fields of surgery, whereas others may find their calling as a matron, overseeing the sprawling wards, in which hundreds of desperate patients may require their immediate attention. For many of the Hospitallers, however, their true calling will still exist out in the chaotic war zones of the battlefield, and in these cases, they will walk as some of the finest of combat medics to be found within the Imperium. Through the battered ranks of an Imperial offensive, we will inevitably find wounded soldiers writhing in the mud, hysterically crying out for aid as their own lifeblood seeps from near-mortal wounds. Others will be stricken with life-eating diseases, chewing through their organs and limbs at such a rate that survival seems to be merely a pipe dream. But even for these terrified souls, hope is not lost. The Hospitallers will charge through the front lines, diving down to quickly triage their patient, before amputating necrotic appendages, removing foreign, invasive entities from their racked frame, or by administering the specific aid needed to remedy their horrific condition. Though these situations are undeniably stressful, each sister will be seen to enact their duties with a solemn sense of compassion, reassuring the fallen soldier that their life is not over, and that their duties to the Emperor have not come to an end. Back within the recovery tents of the armies, most have come to see these sisters as graceful saints, whose merciful aid may be the only reminder that even within the most harrowed of battlefields, that their humanity has not been lost, and that there are some who have still come to care for the meek, fallen souls of mankind. Within the sanctuaries of the Orders Hospitaller, we would find sprawling libraries with great tomes containing the specific methods and practices needed to tend to even the most grievous of maladies. Some will even cover treatments designed to counter the demonic plagues of the warp, whereas others will lay out the curious techniques needed to save a patient who has been afflicted by a psychically levied curse. Beyond the immediate treatment of the wounded, some sisters have dedicated themselves towards developing rehabilitation programs for those who have been saved from death. These battered souls may have been once relegated into becoming a mindless servitor, but through the grace of the sisterhood, they will walk again. And though they may not be able to perform the same duties as they did in the past, it does not change the fact that they are now free to live out the rest of their new life, in whatever capacity they wish. As a rather dark point, however, it is not unheard of for a sister of the Hospitallers to aid in a confessor with his torturous interrogation of a heretic. The zealot may haphazardly lash out with his whip to inflict mortal wounds, slaying the unbeliever in a most brutal fashion, at which point the faithful sister will emerge to prolong the traitor's life, only so that the confessor may continue in his cruciation until he finally gets his long-sought admittance of guilt. Beyond fighting on behalf of humanity and of saving their soldiers' lives, there are some sisters who have dedicated themselves towards more of a diplomatic role within the Imperium, and these would be the members of the Order's Famulous. Whilst the Emperor himself is undeniably the spiritual liege of the Imperium, it would be somewhat foolish to believe that he plays any form of active role within the day-to-day functioning of each minor star system, and instead it will fall to the immense ruling class of noble lords to oversee the administrative or bureaucratic laws which govern humanity. Naturally, when one is given power over a small estate, an entire world, or even of a local sector, they will often forget that they themselves have a duty to serve their fellows, and so corruption runs utterly rampant in these out-of-touch patricians. But this will be where the sisters of the Order's Famulous come to enforce their rulings. Acting as advisors, they exist as the guiding hands of the Emperor, scrutinizing the existing laws of each noble to ensure that in their lofty position, that they continue to serve humanity, rather than their own ambitions. Further to this, they will often suggest their own directives to be taken by the lords, if they feel that perhaps the downtrodden citizens of their realm are being mistreated. This goes far beyond simple laws, and it can extend to the sister recommending profitable trade routes with local systems, combined construction programs with nearby forge worlds, or even to write up new alliances with some of the more well-guarded of worlds found in the surrounding region. The expectation of these would be that if these plans do in fact lead to an increase in planetary prosperity, then it will generally uplift the living standards of its citizens. But as we all know, it is rather rare for such wealth to trickle down to those who need it most. If an imperial world has ground to a halt due to the constant bickering and political disagreements between prominent noble factions, then the attached sister may seek to circumvent such trouble by orchestrating a series of royal marriages or mutually beneficial agreements between the groups, in the hopes that it will seal them together and put a stop to this pointless waste of time. Even if she believes that they will be beneficial to the world, the sister will have something of an ulterior motive behind such actions. It is something of an open secret that those within the Order's Famulous will constantly strive to empower the nobles who are most loyal and faithful to the Emperor, as they believe that if one truly holds the imperial creed within their heart, that the fair and prosperous treatment of their realm will be soon to follow. It should be unsurprising to most of you, but the sisters within this order are loyal only to the ecclesiarchy, and any feigned allegiance to their assigned noble is one which has been acted up, primarily to smooth out their diplomatic missions. The noble lords, however, are ignorant to this fact, and in many cases they see the presence of the sister as being more of a token of respect bequeathed by the Imperium, almost as if it is a seal of approval to hold a diplomat of this caliber within their retinue. But thanks to their arrogance, the sisters will be able to access near every dark corner of this world's high society, discovering secretive cabals, corrupted officials, or even of shady dealings made with factions who are less keen on the overall flourishment of all mankind. As they continue in their appointed post, the sister will report back with a constant stream of information to the investigative branches of the ecclesiarchy. And if it seems that the nobles are straying from the Emperor's light, then the agents of the Imperium will be quick to descend with righteous fury. It may begin with simple punishments, such as by increasing the amounts paid in the imperial tithe, or by restructuring their governing practices. But in cases where even the slightest hint of treachery has been detected, then there will be no mercy shown to the arrogant heretics. Entire noble houses who had ruled over their world for thousands of years will be abducted from their world, shuttled away to the interrogation chambers of the ecclesiarchy, where they will be forced to confess their sins and to find absolution in their own deaths. Every trace of their family name will be expunged from official records, family tombs will be dug out and incinerated, and from the wider Imperium's perspective, it would be as if this noble house never once existed in the first place. Though they do not perform their actions within the same spotlight as the militant sisters of battle, those within the Order's Famulous have undeniably steered the Imperium towards a more advantageous state from behind closed doors. It would be impossible to know of just how far their influence has reached, but we can say with a great deal of certainty that many of the more prosperous of star systems within the Imperium will have been quietly corralled into their state of success by the grace of these sisters' guiding hands. Though their agents will likely only be remembered within the sanctuaries of the Order's Famulous, I believe that their silent deeds will prove to withstand the tests of time. There are billions of worlds to be found within the vast expanse of our galaxy, and even for those which are seen as being utterly uninhabitable to humans, they may have very well been steeped in the rich history of esoteric alien life forms, and until we fully understand their nature, we cannot be truly sure if they exist as a mortal danger to the further existence of all mankind. Similarly, humanity did indeed spread out through the cosmos during the dark age of technology, and after becoming severed from the wider Imperium. It is not inconceivable to believe that they may have developed their own languages or cultural practices, within which many forbidden secrets may be found. Upon uncovering these forlorn vestiges of life, the Imperium will naturally treat the aliens or lost humans with a great degree of suspicion. But from this there is an innate desire to understand and learn of what they had kept hidden for all these long years. This will be where the Sisters of the Order's Dialogus step forward, as it is their sole duty to take on the revered role as the scholars of the galaxy. The erudite sisters will be tasked with translating and deciphering the mysterious texts, records, and sometimes esoteric glyphs of the newly discovered language, from where they will attempt to transcribe it out into High Gothic, and even to produce a full lexicon, if it indeed seems possible. It would be optimistic for us to believe that this is done to expand our horizons and to better understand the different cultures of the galaxy, but we must remember that these translations are performed through the eyes of zealots, and all which they see has been tinted under the guise of faith. For, you see, the primary goal of their mission is not to learn of the individual nuances of each distant civilization, as instead it is performed to deepen our knowledge on the long history of the God Emperor. The sisters believe that we have only just scratched the surface of the holy deeds performed by their spiritual liege during his long life, and that through the study of these long-dead languages, that they may eventually come to produce a complete history of his divine actions. Because of this, they are most interested in finding abandoned worlds previously seeded during the aforementioned dark age of technology, as they believe that whichever humans once lived here may have existed as the sole witnesses to a heavenly action performed by the passing emperor. Furthermore, since they will obviously accredit all miracles or saintly deeds to his glorious might, then even the smallest hint of such a feat occurring will be interpreted by them as a clear sign that he exerted some form of influence upon this world. But aside from attributing supernatural occurrences to his grace, if the sisters find an alien record in which an apocalyptic event was inscribed, then this too could suggest that the Emperor once brought damnation to the foul Xenos. Whether they are correct in their analysis or not, it does not detract from the fact that these sisters are perhaps the leading experts in xenolinguistics found within the Imperium. Their sanctuaries will be brimming with labyrinthine libraries, containing the fully translated lexicons of untold millions of alien languages, some of which were last spoken long before mankind even stood upon two legs. From this, it should be clear that if an inquisitor, or even a fabled assassin of the Venus Temple, requires aid in understanding an enigmatic cipher of some heretical or alien language, that they will turn to the Sisters of the Order's Dialogus to assist them in their mission. Their skills in locating curious patterns or identifying contextual elements to an unknown language are so finely honed that it will never take them long to finally decipher and crack open a cryptic text, revealing the writer's secrets to be exploited by the scrutinous gaze of the Imperial agent. As an extension of this point, this branch of the Sisterhood exists as part of the vast intelligence service to the Imperium. Any enemy communications, whether encoded within an unfathomable puzzle or if spoken in an unknown alien language, will be safe from their prying minds, and none will be able to hide their secrets if left with these sisters for long. This unique skill set, however, does make the members of this order as a rather tantalizing target for certain hostile factions. They hold such a vast repertoire of what is often forbidden knowledge that a heretical group would likely revel in capturing one of these sisters, in the hopes that she may provide them with an extinct lexicon, from which they could use to channel the ancient powers of the warp. As a result of this, those within the Order's Dialogus will most often remain within their sanctuaries, poring over esoteric texts by candlelight, in their ceaseless mission to translate each and every tongue ever spoken throughout the stars. Whilst the past four have been some of the largest of orders, we must also acknowledge some of the smaller groups, whose duties, whilst still vital, will often be overlooked by the citizens of the Imperium. For you see, Some of these minor orders will be so specialized in one given task that their role will seem almost inconsequential when compared to that of the Sisters of Battle. But nonetheless, the existence of an order of the Adepta Sororitas should be all the proof needed that they are tending to a most vital task, and the fact that the ecclesiarchy has ordained for their existence means that their work is contributing to the wishes of the Emperor himself. As an example of one of the smaller of non-militant groups, we would find the Order's Fenestrous, who will be deployed upon shrine or cardinal worlds to maintain the vast stained glass windows found throughout the sprawling cathedrals and monasteries of mankind. Again, whilst this may seem somewhat inconsequential when stacked up against with the Order's Hospitaller, we must remember that the human masses upon even these sacred worlds can become lost, straying into the dark path of heresy if they do not believe in the teachings of the Imperial Creed. This will only become more likely if the colossal effigies of faith fall into disrepair. And so, from the continued efforts of the Sisters of Fenestrous, those great bastions will remain just as pristine as they did from the day they were built. Another, known as the Order's Princeps, will play a role somewhat similar to that of the Order's Famulous, though instead of monitoring the imperial lords, they will instead focus on the decrees and directives of the cardinals found within the Holy Synod. Ever since the dark days of apostasy, where Goj van Dyer twisted the wills of the ecclesiarchy to his own gain, the sisters have been appointed to observe and take note of the scholarly debates held between high-ranking cardinals, just to be sure that behind the closed doors of the synod, that they are not acting outside of the purview of the imperial creed. Beyond this, they will be responsible for disseminating the agreed-upon laws through to the wider imperium, and for ensuring that the more dull-witted of nobles understand exactly what each directive truly means. As a rather curious group, the work of the Order's Tarantine is of an incredibly limited scope. However, to the sisters, the duties which they perform are to bring all of humanity closer to the God Emperor. For you see, they are stationed within a fairly small region of space, about the size of a star sector, known as the Terentia Pillars, where within we will find a series of rather dense, gaseous clouds. At first glance, this may appear to be little more than an interstellar field of dust and debris, but upon closer examination, a series of complex and baffling patterns will be seen throughout its swell. The sisters of this order will interpret the swirling shapes and colors, divining from them the impossible will of the Emperor. Thus far, many of the events which they have deciphered from the clouds have eventually come to pass, and so perhaps this gaseous field truly is a wayward miracle of the Emperor. The Sisters of the Order's Pronatus will dedicate their lives to retrieving the many lost artifacts and relics of the ecclesiarchy, bringing back anything which may have been present at the time of a miracle, or of the possessions once owned by a newly canonized saint. They will then meticulously study each recovered treasure, before performing the necessary purification and maintenance rites, and then finally it will be locked away and kept safe from those who would seek to steal such a holy relic. It will also fall to these sisters to bless and maintain the many symbols of worship held by those within the various imperial armies. Perhaps one of their more famous of deeds would be from where, in the wake of the fall of Cadia, it fell to the Order's Pronatus to restore each and every recovered regimental standard of the now battered Imperial Guard forces. Each and every fibre of these banners was meticulously separated, before being purified in the cleansing oils of their order, and only once they had been restored did the sisters stitch in the names of the fallen soldiers in a fine golden thread. As the final of these groups, which I will cover, we now come to the sisters of the orders Sabine. Their members will travel within the vast exploratory and proselytic fleets of the Missionarius Galaxia in the hopes of discovering an ancient human world lost from the light of the wider Imperium. If one is indeed uncovered, then the missionaries and sisters will first determine as to whether or not they believe that the world will willingly re-enter the great iron fold of the Imperium. If peaceful, then normal conversion practices will begin. But if they seem opposed to the imperial creed, then the sisters of the Orders Sabine will silently descend, only to infiltrate their way into the most influential of positions within the unenlightened society. From here, they will begin to covertly spread the word of the Emperor to any who are willing. They will set up small shrines in forgotten huts, uplift the downtrodden humans with promises of strength through faith, and at times, it has not been unheard of for these sisters to perform miracles of their own to bring more over to the side of worship. As many of you would have guessed, this will eventually culminate in the formation of a faithful uprising against the unbelievers, with the sisters leading the newly converted masses against their heathen leaders until the society ultimately emerges from the flames of war as fervent devotees to the imperial creed. This mission is not to be considered as small to any degree, as a sister of this order may spend decades of her life within one of these ignorant communities, and in fact, most within the Order Sabine will never again return to their sanctuary. Instead, the sister will move from world to world, bringing the enlightenment of the Emperor to wherever she walks. There are many more of these minor orders which exist throughout the Imperium, but the ones which we have investigated today are some of the largest or most influential to the furtherment of humanity's reverence towards the imperial creed. Some have been kept under the veil of secrecy, being known only to the ruling abbess herself, and so we may only speculate as to the true reach that this organization holds across the stars. But thankfully, their mission is one which is performed out of their fervent desire to venerate the immortal Emperor, and though he may be entombed upon the golden throne through the zealous fury of the sisters, his word will be carried far and wide, reaching every imperial citizen possible, no matter where they reside within the galaxy. Thus, my friends, we have come to our end. I once again must thank you all for listening to this investigation in its entirety, and I hope that the tales of the Sisterhood will embolden you through your future endeavors. For now, however, as I close this chapter on their tale, I must wish you all a fond goodbye.
Right, hello everyone. So before closing this one out, I wanted to share with you some of the work by the talented artist Servo Printer. So he produces high-quality waterproof stickers with a unique custom design for each of the 18 Space Marine Legions and of their bolters, with options to get the sticker coated in a matte or a holographic finish. These have been carefully produced by hand, being designed and put together by an artist who has been involved in the hobby for over 15 years. For those who are interested in purchasing these stickers, using the code SCHOLAR on his Etsy page, which the link is in the description, will get you 10% off of your order. And of course, once again, just thank you all for listening and take care.